Well, hello there, and welcome to the recording of another episode of Search Marketing Scoop. This is going to be Search Marketing Scoop episode number 15 that we're going to be recording here. We're going to start the show proper in the next 3 or 4 minutes or so. This is just a little informal chat at the beginning, just letting people gather for the live episode, and hopefully chat a little bit there as well. We've got a couple of people in the chat already. We've got quite a few people actually starting to watch live now. So welcome. It's fantastic to have you here. Why don't you share where in the world you happen to be from and what area of digital marketing is your specialty? So are you an SEO? Are you a paid search specialist? Or do you consider yourself to be a bit more of a generalist? We've got Brian Kanowski asking, is there a number to dial in? No, Brian, this is live on YouTube, and hopefully you can see us bang on live here as well. We've got Old Dog Web Strategies and Design from Vancouver, Canada, saying good morning. I'll say good afternoon to you from live from London, but you can be watching us from many areas around the world. I'm sure it's almost nighttime for some people. We've got quite an interesting show structure. We've got Donatus from London as well, actually joining us. Hello, welcome, Donatus. So yeah, we've got quite an interesting show structure for this one because this is going to be a little bit different. Previous shows were focusing on 2 SEO topics and 2 paid search topics. This time is just 1 key paid search topic, 1 SEO topic, and then we're bringing in a new feature called Content Marketing Close-Up, where we're going to analyze a piece of content and see what has made it particularly successful. We have got Mark, who is going to be one of the guests, is interacting in the chat as well. That's the sign of a pro guest interacting in the chat at the same time. Although to become a a guest, Mark, you've got to be interacting at the same time as speaking. So I look forward to seeing if you're going to be one of them. We've got Andy Simpson that's joined us from New Jersey, USA, but a Leeds lad at heart, and he is an SEO manager. Welcome, Andy. Great to have you on board. So say we've got that slightly different structure. It'd be great to hear your feedback on that, to see what you think of it, to see if that's an improvement, or perhaps even you might prefer a show to focus on one particular subject. Maybe you think it's a good idea moving forward to have 1 show SEO, 1 show paid search, 1 show content marketing, maybe change it about a little bit like that. We have got Simon Cox saying, hello all, just joined from Twitter, Semrush chat, roasting of a site. Okay, well, hopefully they're not going to roast the URL that happens to be chatted about in this particular show. But it's great to have you on board as well, Simon. We've got La Luna from Grenada, the Caribbean. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So I reckon it is just about time to start the show proper. That was just an informal chat, and hello. We are recording, of course, properly for our audio podcast. We have an audio podcast that's doing quite well on iTunes and also on quite a few other platforms as well. So just search your favorite podcasting platform for Search Marketing Scoop, and you will find the show if you are a podcast listener. So I'm going to click on the record button properly here, click on the intro music that we're going to be playing, and I will start the introduction proper. Google suggests that you add DatePublished and DateModified to your structured data. Google introduces Ad Strength Indicator, and we have a brand new feature called Content Marketing Close-Up. Broadcasting live in the Semrush YouTube channel, this is Search Marketing Scoop, the Semrush show that brings together the top PPC, SEO, and content marketing folk to discuss the current search headlines and how to improve your digital marketing success. I am your host, David Bain. Let us meet today's guests. So first up, a lady who's completely obsessed by black and white furry animals. She is a traffic drop diagnoser and an overall SEO legend. Welcome to the Scoop, Mary Haynes.
Oh, thanks so much, David, and thanks for having me. This is going to be a fun discussion today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Marie. Yeah. Great to have you on. So next up, a PPC acquisition machine builder. He is an ex-Googler who claims to have been online since 1774. welcome Gianluca Binelli.
Thank you, David, for having me. Very excited to be here.
Thank you, Gianluca. And finally, I mentioned we have a brand new feature on this week's show, Content Marketing Close-Up. This is where we invite a seasoned, successful content marketer onto the show to share some of their strategies. Today, we're pleased to have Mark Traphagen. Welcome, Mark.
I'm glad to be the new guy on the street. This will be fun. Looking forward to it. Thanks, David.
Great stuff. Thanks for joining us, Mark. But let us first go back to Marie for story number 1. And that is, Google is now encouraging you to consider adding date published and date modified to your structured data. So Marie, what's this one all about?
Right. So I think that there are 2 things that we need to talk about on this subject. The first is the actual adding of schema for date published and date modified. And the second is whether that actually has the ability to actually help you rank better. And so in terms of schema, I'm not going to go into the details of implementing it. But Google has suggested that if we can add date published and date modified schema to our articles, that can help them better understand the web. And my understanding of schema is that it's not a direct ranking factor. It's not like sites that have schema automatically rank better, but schema is something that just helps search engines to understand the site better. And one of the things that Gary Ish from Google had said at a recent conference, when he was asked what are the most important things to focus on in SEO for 2018, he said mobile and also schema. And so schema is very important to Google. I think the issue, though, is really, does it matter that our content is recently updated? And what I'd like to talk about is the thing I've been obsessed with for quite a while now is Google's quality raters guidelines. And these guidelines have all sorts of stuff in them about looking at updated content. And so, I mean, we can't get into all the details of how the quality raters guidelines work, but these guidelines were created to teach this whole army of people that Google contracts out as quality raters to determine what is high quality for a website. And they say in several places that if you have a topic on medical, financial, legal topic, that you should be keeping these up to date. And they should be reflecting any current research. And that's something that we see in our site reviews, is that we see these sites with medical topics that are completely outdated. And so I do think that, I don't know that the schema is absolutely 100% necessary in order to show Google that your content is fresh, but you should be updating your content, at least content that people expect to be updated. So anything that changes on a regular basis, you should be updating that regularly.
So schema is not part of the algorithm, but surely if it helps Google to understand the context of your web page and the relevance and how up to date it is, then it's going to be more confident to rank you higher.
And that's the thought. I mean, schema, in my opinion, is something where you just do everything that you can to show Google your good stuff. And so Google should be able to figure out that, oh, I just published this post and I published it on such and such date. They're pretty good at figuring that out. But I actually have a couple of posts on my website that I'm having a hard time getting Google, even though I've written, last updated on this date, or published on this date. I've tried changing the published date, and Google doesn't always figure it out that this is the actual date. So I'm actually going to experiment with adding some different types of schema to see if that can help. But yeah, definitely. I mean, Google has said several times that schema isn't directly a ranking factor, but there's really no negative to applying this schema, as long as you're not trying to fake things. And I should comment here, I mean, as soon as date added, date published, date updated comes into discussion, you'll see people that have these scripts that basically make it so that it's always the updated date, right? So that you go to the site and it says, oh, today's date. Oh, we just happened to update today. And Google's, I'm sure Google is smarter than that. Even in the quality raters guidelines, they say, they tell the quality raters, if you're not sure, if it looks like it's saying it's being updated today, they actually instruct them to look at archive.org and see, has the content actually changed? So the point is not to trick Google into thinking that you're updating your content every day. We tell most of our publishers that have this type of content that should be updated to maybe do it once a quarter. is to go through all their posts and actually look and see, you know, oh, is there any new research that came out that would support our theory here? Or is there anything that's changed? And so that's the type of thing that we want to see.
So Simon Cox is saying in the chat, brave of Google, date published and updated could be optimized. So I assume Google will check the pages to see if there's actually a change other than an update date. Do you see Google kind of crawling, obviously, the content on the page and not being prepared to listen to the new date if there hasn't been a change in content?
I think that would be a pretty easy thing to algorithmically check. And I think Google would be they're aware of most of the tips and tricks that we try to do to manipulate our rankings. And so, if you change the date and the content hasn't changed at all, I'm pretty sure Google can recognize that.
And just last question in relation to this. Obviously, it's possible to publish and have the date of the content available elsewhere. I'm thinking within WordPress and other kind of CMS systems, you have a date published and perhaps date modified that would be available for search engines to crawl. If this date is available elsewhere but not in schema, do you think it'll be just as good, or do you think it's very, very important to actually include it in schema as well?
Well, I think that nobody outside of Google really definitively knows the answer to that. So John Mueller from Google has said in the past that if you have just written on a post last updated, just in plain text, not necessarily even schema, that Google should be able to recognize that this is the last updated date. We keep coming back to this: is schema necessary? Again, I think do everything you can in order to tell Google that your content is fresh. There's really no harm in doing it, provided that you're not, again, trying to trick Google. But yeah, I think just keeping things updated is the key for sure.
Great. Okay, well, let's go over to Gianluca for story number 2, and that is Google introduces ad strength indicator and also reporting for responsive search ads. So Gianluca, what's happening here?
Yeah, there's a very, very exciting news for us in PPC land. So Google recently introduced responsive ads, which is a very exciting feature because basically allows advertisers to get more real estate on Google search. Technically, you will have longer headlines and actually 3 headlines, longer description and 3 headlines. And the magic behind the responsive ads is the ability of Google to sort of mix and match a different portion of different headlines together with different descriptions. Now, ad strength came out as a new KPI, a new metric that for the moment is only applicable to responsive ads. Responsive ads, let me underline, are on search, on display, and also on universal app campaigns. So we will be able to see the ad strength applicable to these 3 areas. Now, generally speaking, responsive ads are nothing new in a way, or let me say are part of a bigger trend. In the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen Google investing more and more into machine learning and automation, really. Since last year, if you have a Google rep, you might have received one of those phone calls suggesting that you should be adding 3 ads per ad group and having everything on automated ad rotation. But also in the last 3, 4, 5 years, you probably have tested and experimented with DSA, also with Artist, formerly known as ad copy suggestion, which was a feature where Google was coming up directly with different ad copies. And now we have responsive ads. So responsive ads really are a different flavor of an overall trend, which is Google trying to give us more love through machine learning. Now, obviously, there's a flip side of the coin, right? So from one side is an exciting opportunities because we get more real estate on for our advertiser, and Google claims this will deliver an uplift up to 15% on average. That's what they see when they compare an ad machine learning fed, let's say, towards a humanly created ad. But the flip side of the coin here is that we kind of are losing control, right? So having more flexibility and giving to Google a bunch of headlines and a bunch of description and have Google to mix and match actually also means that we're losing control. So ad strength comes in as a very, very important KPI when it comes to specifically responsive ads. So one important element I need to underline, ad strength is not the new quality score for the moment, right? And to be honest, I always found weird whenever you write an ad, Google knows. Whenever you write an ad from the go, the first time as a SMB, as a new advertiser, you're writing an ad, Google knows if that ad is going to be performing well or not, right? Because the information that you're using to write the ad actually are the information that will be used to guess your quality score if you are a first-time advertiser before you're actually running any historic data, right? So it's always a little bit weird. It looks, Google is telling you, oh my God, that's a low quality score. I'm not going to tell you, what's going on. So actually, I'm very excited about having ad strength because that kind of reveals a little bit what Google is thinking. In my company, my employer, Boosterbox, we actually were using in the past a script trying to forecast how good the CTR would have been. And I'm really excited now to Google to build actually something like that on top. Now, what is inside our strength? Our strength is a qualitative metric in a way. It's not a 1 to 10 score like we're used to quality score, but it's really something that is ranging from poor until excellent and good. And in theory, there are supposed to be 5 labeled there. And our strength is a metric that is supposed to tell to us, advertiser, how likely is a certain mix of headline and description, how likely is that mix supposed to be performing well in terms of responsive ads. So there are really 3 elements inside our strengths. Number 1, the number of headlines. So right now we can add a min 3 and a maximum of 15 headlines. The ideal suggested in the best practice that being communicated by Google, it's 5. I do not have data yet to tell you if that's a real number. So if we need to take it from Google, Google will say 5, minimum 3, maximum 15. The second ingredient inside ad strength is the uniqueness of the headlines. So obviously, you want to think of having different arrows that you can throw, right? Different benefits telling about your product, your service, your website. So you want to use different headlines and different description that are touching different potential benefits and ideas. So Google is trying to give to the user different options by pushing advertiser to have multiple unique headline. And point number 3 is the description uniqueness. You will note that we don't have a 4th ingredient, which is the description variety, because we really have an opportunity of having minimum 2 and maximum 4 description. So really having 4 description for the moment doesn't seem to be a factor that impact the ad strength, but having a different number, the quantity of headline, that probably will be a factor impacting the ad strength. And finally, another very important news correlated to this ad strength introduction is the fact that the new best practice, and this is totally new versus what we were used to have until a couple of weeks back, Google is now suggesting to have in every ad group 3 ads, and at least one of these should be a responsive ad, which is very, very exciting, I guess. But again, we shouldn't, my experience would be to challenge the best practice and do not take everything from the horse mouth, but probably test things. So a very important message for everyone out there in PPC land, this is still in beta, right? So we should be testing, collecting data before drawing concluding results. And the last related element is the reporting. So there being also some changes in the reporting. David, do you want me to give you more details on reporting as well? You're very excited there?
I'm very excited, but I'm also in trying to ensure that we stick to around about half an hour in the show.
Right. Sorry about that.
You've given a lot of incredible content there, and you've answered, I think, just about every single follow-up question that I even had as well.
Sorry.
I think the only other kind of semi area that I'm still thinking about is quality score. Obviously, you mentioned it's not a replacement for quality score, ad strength indicator. I think you said not yet. Do you see that there may be a merger there at some point?
My gut feeling would be no. I don't think we will ever go there. Quality score is such a pillar of how Google AdWords, sorry, I should say Google Ads, shouldn't I? How Google Ads work as an overall machine. So I wouldn't say that ad strength will replace the quality score, but I'm very excited about that because I think this is about sharing more information with us advertisers, right? So giving us a way to understand more on what Google thinks whenever we're writing an ad. So I wouldn't think that the ad strength would be a replacement of the quality score, but if I had to bet, probably I would bet of Google moving forward to invest definitely more in machine learning, and at the same time giving advertiser more tools to understand what is the thinking behind machine learning.
Wonderful.
Critics of machine learning are always about a black box, and nobody likes black boxes. So Google, being a smart company, I think will address that.
Well, over the next few weeks on The Scoop, we're going to be experimenting with a few new show features. We'd love to get your feedback, whether it's in the live chat or as a rating and review if you're an audio podcast listener. So we're trying to incorporate as much as possible of your feedback into subtly changing the format of the show. So if you've got any thoughts about the number of topics or the topics that are covered in the show, please, within that podcast review system or within the YouTube live chat, let us know your thoughts, and we will certainly read and acknowledge what you're saying there and try and incorporate that in future shows. Let us move on to our content marketing close-up feature. Today, we're looking at an article called Mobile versus Desktop Usage in 2018. Mobile takes the lead. This was published on stonetemple.com. And our third guest, Mark Traphagen, has been overseeing that. So Mark, this is part of a study series that's been quite successful for you in the past. Why so?
Well, first of all, folks want to kind of follow along with the content as we talk about it. The easiest way to find it is go to Google and just type in mobile versus desktop. That's all you need. We're number one. We've been number one for months on that and a whole host of keywords around it. So you can find it very quickly, mobile versus desktop. But yes, this is a study series, and we do several of them. Stone Temple publishes anywhere from 8 to 12 major data studies a year. We always have something in the cook on the stove while we're publishing something. But several of those, we've developed a series where it's data that's kind of benchmarked, and then we can look at it over the years. How does it change? And one of those is we've been looking at is how the usage on mobile versus desktop changes, not only the numbers overall, but also how people use those two differently. So what we're looking at here was published late April, and that is the 2018 update. Sometime in the spring of 2019, we'll update it again.
Okay, and we were chatting briefly before we went live, and we were talking about how to retain the authority of previous articles, and I think you've done something quite neat there with your URL strategy. Would you like to talk a little bit about that as well?
Sure. Eric Enga, our CEO, came up with this. We noticed that we're doing these series, and what happens over time is that most of them in this particular series, even the past posts were getting good links to them, all organically earned, good links from high authority sites. So they were doing well in Google. But as we published more and more of them over the years, that kind of spreads it out, right? And so people are getting different, and sometimes you'll get linked to the older content. So the idea Eric came up with is that we host these series now on a unique page. So if you're looking at the content, you're looking at a page, not a blog post, and that URL stays the same all the time. So each time a new study in this particular series, mobile versus desktop usage, is published, it goes on that page. It swaps out. It becomes the most recent content. The original page, remains on the site under its own URL, but redirects to this. The main purposes of that are twofold. I'll just cover it quickly. One is straight SEO. We're getting all this authority on mobile versus desktop. We want to keep it on the same URL over time. So when we do this, what happens is all the links are to that one URL. And so even when we update the study, all the link equity that we built is still going to that same URL. And it's been highly successful in two things. One is obviously, we've ruled that keyword for many, many months now. It's become the benchmark study. If anybody talks about this, we get a link. In fact, every week we get more major links to it. I mentioned that the the organic search traffic here now, 6-7 months later, continues to rise. The other quick purpose is that people are always getting the latest. So if you happen to find a link to one of the older versions of the study and you click on it, it redirects to this page. So you're always getting the latest version. You can still find them. They're all linked from the latest version. The old ones, you can still get to them, but that's basically the strategy.
So obviously you've decided that this is a long-term phrase that you want to rank for. And I would imagine you've done a lot of research into deciding that that was a phrase that was likely to be long-term, to provide long-term value. How did you actually make that decision that that was a topic that would be valuable to be doing ongoing studies into?
Well, I'd like to claim that we knew the specific phrase would be incredibly valuable. I wish we were that smart. Really, it was more the topic. Like, we knew we wanted to have authority in the mobile area, and we want to be thought of in that area. There's a number of areas that we're actively working on to try to establish ourselves as major authorities. Mobile is one, digital personal assistants and how they work, and the apps for those, all those things. But with this, we kind of stumbled upon it. That doing a study, we started 3 years ago, was benchmarking data. And this is something we're trying to do more of now because of the success of this, where it's the kind of thing that becomes a reference point. We did it in a way that nobody else had quite done it. And, once it got a little success, we did some promotion on it. It got noticed. Google picked it up. Then it becomes, like I say, the benchmark that everybody's going to link to. And the success just keeps on rolling after that point.
And you've published it as a page rather than a post. What benefits does that have?
We do have a post for each one, but the post is just a teaser that links to this page. And the benefit is just simply that it's static. It's a static URL. Google doesn't see it as a blog post. It kind of fades away over time, but it's a main page on our site. It's linked directly from the home page. It's one of the few pages we choose to do that. If you go on our site, we have a tab called Insights, and you'll see right there, you can see the topics that we do these studies on, these feature studies that we keep updating. Each of those is a unique page like this. It just gets the latest version swapped in when it's published.
Lovely. Okay, so I'd love to just open this up, this discussion up a little bit with our other guests there. So maybe let's start with Marie. Marie, what are your initial thoughts on this, and is there anything that you would do differently to potentially even drive greater success?
Well, I think the first thing that I thought of when I saw this tactic is that this is exactly what I like to preach on in terms of earning links. Because so many people for years have been focused on how can I build links? How can I create links that Google is going to think are people wanting to recommend my content? And what Stone Temple has done here is actually create something that people want to recommend. And so one of the best ways that I find to do that is to find research. And I think in pretty much any niche that you're in, you can publish research on something that would be interesting to people. And so that would be, whether it's actual scientific research, that's been written up in a peer respected journal, or just, here's what we gathered from our data. Like, we have data from all across every single state, and here's the most popular use of whatever in each state. So the point is, instead of trying to artificially build links, I love that you've created something that people want to talk about. I think that's my main takeaway.
I'll just quickly add, and this might add into Gianluca's comments as well, that we do some promotion. So we don't do what most people call link building, active link building, but we do promote the content, obviously on social. We do some paid promotion of it whenever a study comes out. We also do some outreach. We know people in the media who have written about our studies in the past, so they're already familiar with us, and we offer them an embargoed copy ahead of time so they can see it and they can write about it when it comes out. And then, beyond that, we sometimes target some of the paid advertising, paid social, especially at influencers, at media people. A little bit harder to judge how much success we got that, but we see that as seed. We don't keep that up long term. That's seeding it, because once you get a few of those, you get some good links, it starts getting some authority in Google, and it becomes the benchmark, as you said, then everybody starts linking to it, and that's what we're experiencing now.
Marie, is it still necessary to do some keyword research and actually try and incorporate a target keyword phrase within the heading in such an authoritative article, or is it because it's so significant and it's just great content, and Google will crawl through it and naturally know what to rank it for anyway?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, keyword research is going to be important whenever you're writing an article. You need to know, I mean, what are people searching for to get here? And I think a lot of keyword research is so much trial and error. Like you start off, like Mark said, I mean, they didn't know initially what the main drivers were going to be to this post. But then you start looking at what, even the data in Search Console or information that Semrush can give us that, we didn't realize like these keywords are actually driving more, maybe they're driving more conversions. And so we can tweak the page to incorporate other keywords. I mean, keyword research is always going to be important. But I think Google is so much better. They go so much deeper than keywords now. I think years ago, it was like, let's get it in our title tag and this many times in the post. And now Google can determine which posts are actually answering the questions people have. And so it looks like this post is, it's got really thorough answers. If I ask the question, what are the differences between mobile and desktop? How has that changed since last year? I can get those answers from this post, and I probably can't from any other post on the internet. So that's good stuff.
I'd love to get Gianluca's thoughts on this as well. Gianluca, Mark mentioned that when he published the post, he spent a little bit of money on social media promotion. Can you think of other paid promotional methods that you would use to actually drive some initial traction to that kind of piece of content?
Sure. I guess the most natural tactic I would think of whenever you whenever you publish a piece of content that is hitting the spot, like the case that we're discussing today, a classic strategy would be a two-step approach. Whenever you're running cheap media, so let's say some display advertising, some display Google or other network or native advertising, with the sole purpose of having engaged viewers, right? So the only aim of your first step is just dropping the cookie. You will drop the cookie for users that have been for a certain time on the website or perform a specific action, and then you will do a remarketing campaign with a more, let's say, direct sales type of message at a later stage, only to those that express a certain interest in this type of content. And this type of dual step, first dropping the cookie and then really try to close the deal, is something that we see more and more effective, especially when it comes to this type of high value content, when it comes to B2B advertising that has a longer attribution funnel.
Okay, great tactic there. In terms of defining people who haven't expressed an interest, is that just anyone who has visited the page? Can you define people who have visited for a certain length of time, or would you define people who have visited multiple pages on your site to retarget?
Well, in my experience, we usually use an dimension matrix. The two main dimensions will be the recency. So recency is always super important when it comes to remarketing for the second step. So you want to be higher on people that have been in the last hour and much less on people that have been a month ago. The second factor that you want to take in consideration is the depth of visit. And here, some of the KPIs that you mentioned could be used in order to build up, let's say, an aggregated measurement that you could call engagement or something of that nature, which is usually factor of time on site, depth of visit, seeing multiple pages, clicking on a scroll down action. So there's no one solution fit all there, but the item that you really are trying to measure whenever you put together a taxonomy there is engagement. The classic Google promise when it comes to remarketing, but it's really about any remarketing company, is, oh my gosh, you have 2% conversion rate. Let's go after the 98%, those 98 users that are not converting for you. Reality is, out of these 98, 80 couldn't care less about your ad anyways. So you are actually wasting money twice, right? So the point is, how do you isolate those remaining 18 out of the 98 and you focus only on those? So thinking engagement together with recency are really two good metrics in order to zoom in on the 18% that we want to try to win back. And this piece of content would be great for such a strategy.
Great tips. Well, that just about takes us to the end of the 15th episode. It's just time for an actionable tip from each of our guests. So this is related to, or not necessarily related to, what we've been discussing so far. So let's go with Marie first. Marie, what is your actionable tip?
Sure. So my obsession right now is with Google's quality raters guidelines. And the best tip I can give is to take the time to read them. They're about 160 pages, and there are so many examples in there where Google specifically says, this is a high quality site. We think this is high quality because of this. We think this is low quality because of this. And so you can easily find them. Just search for search quality guidelines by Google. And that would be the best way to spend your afternoon is reading those, because they're very exciting.
Or your bedtime reading, yes. Great tip there, though. You can find Marie over at mariehaynes.com. So over to Gianluca. Gianluca, what is your actionable tip?
My actionable tip is fairly obvious. I would definitely go and test out their responsive ads. So if you're lucky enough to have one account to be selected as part of this beta, you want to test them out. I really became not popular in my company because I obliged my pod to spend hours and hours to roll out responsive ads everywhere, at least to gather data. So I really encourage people to test them out because they're a very, very exciting opportunity.
Superb. And you can find Gianluca over at boosterboxdigital.com. And finally, Mark. Now, I noticed Kirsten Drysdale saying in the chat that Mark's got a wonderful bow tie, and Mark replying, #personal branding. I wonder if personal branding is going to be your actionable tip, or you've got something else, Mark.
Well, I could talk about that, but I think my actionable tip out of what we talked about today may be a little obvious, but I just want to emphasize it, and that is, if you're doing data-based content, considering developing some benchmark studies. And by benchmark, I mean where it's not just, it's relatively easy to have kind of a one-off success with a study because maybe it breaks some news or it has a fact that nobody's seen before, and that's great. But when you do these kind of studies where it's going to be a trend that's going to change over time, and where you can come back into it and dip back into it, it becomes really evergreen. It becomes something that the people in your industry value, they want to link to, they want to share, they want to talk about. The goal is to become the reference point, and that's the most valuable content.
Wonderful. And you can find Mark over at stonetemple.com. I've been your host, David Bain. You can also find me over at digitalmarketingradio.com. We will be recording the next episode, episode 16 of Search Marketing Scoop, at the same time, same place, the Semrush YouTube channel, on Wednesday, the 12th of September, in 1 week's time. Yes, we're moving to weekly shows. On next week's show, my guests are scheduled to be Craig Campbell from Craig Campbell SEO, Aaron Levy from Elite SEM, plus Mike Alton from the Social Media Hat. In the meantime, thanks not only to Marie, Gianluca, and Mark for this episode, but also to you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, subscribe to the audio podcast if you're not already. You can find links to that over at searchmarketingscoop.com. And all that's left to say is, until next time, be fantabulous and do one thing that scares you. Adios.